Hey, what's up YouTube? Today we're covering the insanely tanky top laner, Dr. Mundo, the madman of Zaun.
Mundo! Smash!
Dr. Mundo's a really tanky top laner who has great sustain from his ultimate and passive. However, pre-level 6 he's a rather weak champion and can struggle against a lot of the other top laners out there. He, however, scales really well, and as the game progresses he becomes a monster. His cleaver gives him a strong poke and can even perma-slow enemy champions. He's got a built-in CC resistance from his W, and he actually does a lot of damage while building tanky because of his E ability. Now, he doesn't actually have a gap creator like Arcane Shift, but he's still really hard to gank because you can't really kill him. His ultimate, however, is countered by Ignite and Grievous Wounds, and this can take away a lot of your tankiness. Since you stack a lot of health, you're rather vulnerable to percentage health dealing damage champions like Vayne. You're also not that great when you're behind, you have no gap closer, and no hard CC, you just have a slow from your cleaver. He's an insanely fun champion to play since he can basically run wherever the hell he wants and not die, but he's no longer that insanely overpowered top laner that could single-handedly carry games. For our masteries, we go 12 Ferocity and 18 Resolve, grabbing either Grasp of the Undying or Bond of Stone as our keystone mastery. I'm a Mundo player that prefers Grasp of the Undying, but I see a lot of Mundos out there taking Bond of Stone, so it is a great pick as well. Other than that, you take a little bit of damage in the Ferocity tree and an assload of regeneration in the Resolve tree, so people can't push you out of lane. For our runes, we take 9 greater marks of Hybrid Penetration, 9 greater seals of Scaling Health, 6 greater glyphs of Scaling Cooldown Reduction, 3 greater glyphs of Magic Resist, and then either 3 greater contestances of Armor or Movement Speed. If I'm in top lane against a high attack damage champion like a Riven or Tryndamere, I always opt for the armor. Of course, if I'm in one of those matchups where I don't really need the armor, movement speed is great so you can roam around in team fights much easier. You don't have a gap closer, and you really rely on having some decent movement speed. Getting cooldown reduction on Mundo is also a little hard, so taking those 6 greater glyphs of scaling cooldown reduction for 10% at 18 is really nice. Other than that, well, he does AP and obviously he auto-attacks, so Hybrid Penetration is the best for our reds, and of course Scaling Health, as he is a health champion, are great for yellows. Your passive is based on your health pool, so we want a decent health pool. For our summoners, we take Teleport and Ghost. Teleport's a requirement so Mundo can actually split push for large portions of the game and still make it to objectives and team fights. You can also roam down to an objective with your Ghost, and if somebody tries taking your tower, teleport back and save it. Ghost is great on Mundo because he's already insanely hard to bring down and he doesn't need flash to escape a gank. Most of the time you honestly don't even need Ghost, you're so tanky you can simply walk out most of the time unless there's Grievous Wounds or Ignite. Ghost then also adds a ton of mobility in teamfights, and Mundo can, as he says, go wherever the hell he wants. Now we're going to look at each of his abilities, starting with his passive, Adrenaline Rush. So this is an incredibly simple to understand ability. Dr. Mundo regenerates 0.3% of his maximum health each second. So this right here is why Mundo goes for a high health build. He'll get stuff like, a Sunfire Cape or Warmog's Armor, stuff like that. Stuff with health and defensive stats. The more health you get, the more health this regenerates, and the harder you are to actually bring down in lane or in team fights when you're regenning so much goddamn health. Next up is your Q, Infected Cleaver. So of course this is the ability that throws that cleaver I was talking about. It deals magic damage and slows by 40% for 2 seconds to the first enemy it hits. It then also heals for half of the cost, and yes, Mundo's abilities cost health. If the Infected Cleaver kills its target, the cost is refunded. This means it's completely fine to last hit minions with this ability since you're not going to lose health. It then also has a minimum damage threshold and is capped against non-champions. So this is a great ability, and this is the one we actually max first. It can do a ton of poke damage, make last hitting really easy even if you are having trouble in lane, and is just fantastic. It has a 4-second cooldown and it does slow for 2 seconds, so with CDR you can basically have somebody permaslowed. Basically, this is just his best ability by quite a large margin, so of course we're maxing it first. Next up is Dr. Mundo's W, Burning Agony. So Dr. Mundo sets himself on fire, dealing magic damage every half second to nearby enemies and reducing the duration of crowd control on himself. The magic damage is between 17.5 and 47.5 plus 10% AP, which of course is based off rank. The crowd control reduction starts at 10% and ends up at 30% at max rank. Pretty damn nice. Now you have to be very careful when you are using this ability because it costs between 10 and 30 health per second. Early on in the game when you don't have a lot of regen or any tanky stats, you don't want to be using this too often because you're going to end up killing yourself. Once you do get a really high health pool and you start regenning a lot from your passive, you can pretty much always have this on and not actually lose health. Basically, just be really careful with this ability early on, but later on in team fights when you have all the stats you need, you can have it on at all times and have a 30% reduced CC reduction. Mundo's last basic ability is his E, Masochism. When you activate it, for the next 5 seconds, your basic attacks have bonus range and deal percentage of his maximum health as bonus physical damage. Dr. Mundo also gains bonus attack damage, which is increased by 1% per 1% of his missing health. The least amount of AD you can get is between 20 and 100, which of course is based off of the rank of the ability. It's also worth noting that Masochism does reset your auto attack timer, so you pretty much want to use it right after an auto attack, so you maximize your damage. So yeah, there's not a whole lot to say about the ability. It can be great to activate when you are under your own tower to make sure you can last hit the minions. Of course, activate it when you are in a team fight to add just a little bit more damage on the target you're on top of. Not as good as our Q and W, but still a decent ability, but we have to max it last. Last but not least, his ultimate, Sadism. When you activate this ability, you start regenerating health every second for 12 seconds and you gain bonus movement speed for that duration. You gain a whopping 3.3 to 5% of your maximum health every single second. The bonus movement speed is then between 15 and 35% as well, which is really nice in team fights. The cost, however, is 20% of your current health, so you have to be very careful how you use this ability. You don't want to use it too high, otherwise you're removing a massive chunk of your own health, but you also don't want to use it too low, otherwise you may end up dropping too low and die to Ignite or some other ability before you actually have regeneration kick in. Now even though the cooldown is rather long, especially early on, don't be afraid to use this ability if you're low in lane just to top up and not have to leave that lane. Being able to sit in the lane as much as possible is a great thing to do, so make sure you take full advantage of your ultimate and sit in lane getting everything you can. First in our ability order is of course our ultimate, Sadism. We then move into our basic abilities, and the first one we want to max is our Infected Cleaver. This is really strong poke, can be a perma slow, and is great for last hitting as well, and is a very strong ability, so we have to take it first. Coming in at second is Burning Agony for all of that AoE burning damage we can do later on in the game, and that CC reduction. Last, of course, is our Masochism. It's a really nice ability, but it's not as good as Q and W, so we had to leave it for last. In the early game, we're weak as shit, and we pretty much just want to get whatever we can actually get out of the lane. A lot of the top laners out there can deny us farm, push us under tower, or just straight up kill us in the lane. So what can you do? Well, your job is to survive in the lane, farm as much as you can, avoid trays at all costs against strong opponents, and poke with your cleaver. When you're finally level 6, this already starts to turn around. When you're low on health, make sure you activate your ultimate, return to a really decent health pool, and keep farming that top lane. After we finally poke somebody down with our cleavers, we can start going in for trades or kills. Activate our W for the CC reduction, although you have to keep in mind how much health you have because this reduces your health by a lot really fast, and activate our E for more DPS. In the mid game, it's finally our time to shine as we should have our Sunfire Cape and Spirit Visage built and will be so hard to kill. You want to look for opportunities to gank with your teleport to help your team. Make sure you also let them know when you do have teleport available so they can start looking for some of those objectives. You also need to make sure that you keep up your farm at this point so you remain a very tanky frontliner for your team. Sit in lanes pushing as much as you can, putting out a ton of map pressure. Force the enemy team to rotate for you. If they end up over-rotating, either have a counter gank come in or have your team take an objective. If you've had a good game, in the late game you should start feeling like a raid boss and be insanely hard to bring down. You'll also likely start getting flamed in all chat and people will start bitching for Mundo nerfs. By the way, if you guys didn't realize at this point, you are a tank, so make sure you be a fucking tank. Soak damage in the front line for your team so they're able to put out tons of damage. Try and slow the enemy carries trying to get to your carries with your cleaver so they have a much easier time kiting. Peel if it's needed, but generally you want to hold the enemy frontliners as far away from your carries as possible. If you have Ignite or Grievous Wounds on you, try to avoid ulting until after, unless of course you would die if you didn't. Mundo's countered by a lot of things, the first one of course being the Grievous Wounds and Ignite healing reduction. This makes both your passive and ultimate rather shitty for that duration and could pretty much kill you. Champions that deal % health damage are also very strong against Mundo since he stacks a lot of health. This of course would be champions like Kog'Maw, Olaf, and Vayne. Darius is also a pretty strong counter because he's a motherfucker. His early game is so incredibly strong it's stupid, and Mundo's is complete garbage. Darius is going to completely dominate the lane, and Mundo is going to slit his wrists in frustration. Last is Riven, another top laner that is good against Mundo. She deals lots of damage and has a shield, which gives her a big advantage in trades. She's got a really good early game like Darius, she's just a less intense, not as fucking stupid version of Darius, I suppose. Last but not least is our item build, and you start with either a Doran shield and a health potion, or armor and a bunch of potions. You pretty much always take the Doran shield unless you're against stuff like Riven or Tryndamere, stuff that actually does a lot of attack damage where you really need that armor. For our first buy, you want to either get the Bami's Cinder or the Spectre's Cowl, depending on if you're going for the Spirit Visage or Sunfire Cape first. This will of course depend on if you're against an AP or an AD opponent. Then of course you want to get normal boots of speed and a vision ward so you can ward a bush and see enemy ganks coming in. For the core build, we of course get the Sunfire Cape, the Spirit Visage, and Merc Treads. I'm a really big fan of Merc Treads on him because, you know, he doesn't have a gap closer and I like having as much CC reduction as possible. Sunfire Cape and Spirit Visage have always basically been in his core. You get some nice AoE burning damage, which works really good with Burning Agony, and the increased healing for your ultimate and passive. For our armor options, we first have a Randuin's, and I would get this against stuff that has high crit like a Yasuo or a Jhin. Then of course if you're against a very high AD team that has a lot of auto attackers, grab the Thornmail so they kill themselves. Looking for a bit more mobility? Why not grab a Dead Man's Plate? Also a fantastic armor item. So for the magic resist and health options, coming in at number 1 is the Banshee's Veil. Fantastic for its health, magic resist, and of course blocking abilities. We of course also have the Warmogs listed here because it's the highest health item and works great with Mundo. It also gives you some much needed CDR and some nice regeneration. Sterak's Gauge and ZZ Rot Portal are items I don't grab too often, but I see every now and again. If you want to do a little bit more damage, grab the Sterak's, and if you wish to put a bit more pressure on lanes, you can get the ZZ Rot. Now for my example full build, this of course is against a balanced damage team. If you were against a full AD team, you wouldn't need the Banshee's Veil, and if you're against a full AP team, you wouldn't really need a Thornmail, would you? Anyways, of course it starts with our core, a Sunfire Cape, Spirit Visage, and Merc Treads. We then get the Warmogs for all of the health, cooldown reduction, and regeneration. I almost always get this item, but if I'm against something like an Olaf top and there's a Vayne bottom lane and stuff that does damage based on your health, I won't get this item. Now generally there's going to be at least an AD carry, perhaps another attack damage champion as well, and Thornmail is great against those champions. Since you already have a really high health pool, this gives you a shitload of armor and makes you so tanky. I then end the build with a Banshee's Veil. Kind of already talked about it, you know, you got the health, you got the blocking of the abilities, and you got the magic resist. Fantastic against teams that have at least some AP on them. So that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our Dr. Mundo top lane guide. If you guys did enjoy the video, please like and subscribe as we have League of Legends content coming out daily. You can also visit our website, www.egamingtv.com, and our Twitter, which we do skin giveaways on. All of that stuff is in the description of the video. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Peace.
For me to come clean. Hey, yeah, woke up to the same old shit.